All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Ariana Fernandez, and I'm going to be presenting on school choice, specifically as it pertains to the charter school movement. And first, I just want to thank the Interdisciplinary Research Conference for having me. And I want to share a little bit about the larger project that I'm working on right now. I'm honored to have received one of two fellowships with the Lemieux Center for Public Policy, through which I've chosen to research school choice with the help of Dr. Elmore, who's here today. And that project will culminate in a published paper and a presentation on October 4th. So you should all join me for that. And if you want more information about that project or about the center, you can search Lemieux Fellows on the Palm Beach Atlantic University website. So the main question that I'm researching for my Lemieux Fellowship is whether or not charter schools pose a threat to the public education of the United States, especially that of Florida. And today's presentation is going to define school choice and explain the criteria that form charter schools. And then from there, I'll share some facts that I've discovered in my research so far and draw some preliminary conclusions and further points of study from that information. There will be a brief period of question and answer following the content, during which you're welcome to ask any questions you may have about my research or the information that I present today. So first, many of you might be wondering what constitutes school choice. So as used in the United States, the term school choice refers to the offering of various programs which give parents the ability to select from several schooling models which they feel are the most appropriate educational options for their children. This includes methods of schooling such as public schools, private schools, homeschools, and charter schools, as well as virtual schools. School choice also includes special programs offered in the public schools such as magnet programs, and more than 1 in 4 Florida public schools are either magnets or charters, according to new data from the United States Department of Education. Evidence of the role that Florida holds as a leader in school choice is very common, as the fact that we have so many magnet and charter schools. The ability to take advantage of various schooling options such as these may be made possible by school vouchers, education savings accounts, tax credit scholarships, and/or tax credits and deductions, or a combination of those. And each state can choose which of those options it implements. Of these, Florida offers 4 educational choice programs, including an education savings account program, school voucher option, and 2 tax credit scholarships. Despite all these and many more options that constitute school choice, the most commonly recognized form of school choice is charter schools. In 1996, the first Florida charter school statutes were approved, and since then, Florida legislation regarding charter schools has grown and adapted to state needs. Charter schools are tuition-free, publicly funded schools formed by a private entity or corporation with the agreement of the local school district. Teachers, parents, corporations, or private businesses can apply for a charter agreement from their local school district. They must follow specific requirements during the application process and review, especially with regard to the use of funding, exemptions from certain statutes dealing with Florida's public schools, and state-approved training of school administrators. Florida currently has 646 charter schools. Charter schools choose to focus their instructional practices on a specific need or population. Several local examples include Ben Gamla Charter School, which includes instruction in Hebrew, Potentials Charter, which offers support for students with physical impairments, Glades Academy, which includes agriculturally focused extracurricular activities, and Believers Academy, which serves students at risk of academic failure. There's a great amount of debate surrounding the operation of charter schools, both nationally and locally. Proponents of charter schooling hold that charter schools create a competitive environment for public schools and hold them accountable to improve the quality of public education. They also hold that charter schools generally have focused curricular emphases and smaller class sizes, which can cater to students' needs. They give parents more freedom to choose schooling options that are best suited to their children. And also that charter schools have relative freedom from excessive regulations, which encourage innovative administrative and instructional practices. On the other hand, opponents of the charter school movement maintain that charter schools drain funding from public schools, that they're not held sufficiently accountable for the academic performance of their students, that they're able to hire less experienced teachers, which limits the quality of academic curriculum, and that they contribute to socioeconomic segregation by attracting students from a specific socioeconomic background. It's not always clear where these claims come from. Are they only from personal experience, or are they generalizations based on one instance and applied to the whole of the movement? It's not really clear. But regardless of where the claims come from, an examination of the facts about charter schools is in order. So first, let's look at the availability of charter schools in Florida. I'd like to point out that this data in the map is from the 2010-2011 school year, but it does help in picturing the geographic distribution of charter schools in our state. The current number of counties without charter schools in Florida is 20, an increase of 4 from the time that this map was created. Since 2011, the counties of Dixie, Jefferson, Madison, and Columbia have all gained charter schools. These counties are in the upper yellow section of the map that you see bordering Georgia. It's interesting to note that although at the 2011 count, a third of Florida counties did not have operating charter schools, this only accounted for 5% of the state's public enrollment. In my investigations and conversations with charter school liaisons in several of Florida's school districts, I discovered that several reasons these counties did not have charter schools might be because they're smaller or are in more rural districts in which the local public school may be serving their population adequately. Secondly, because the traditional public school in those counties are seen to be performing well in the eyes of the residents of that county. Or finally, that there are several districts which hold higher standards for the implementation of a charter. One of the most common claims in opposition to charter schools is that they cater only to certain ethnicities or socioeconomic backgrounds, especially in relation to primarily white districts. In a nation that's increasingly concerned about race relations, especially in our nation's public education system, this can be a huge factor in an individual or organization's support or opposition to the presence of charter schools. It's commonly suggested that charter schools contribute to segregation by self-selecting majority students only. The statewide data you see on this slide suggests otherwise, though. Although I'll be performing further research on a county-to-county basis, this data does suggest that there's more diversity in the charter schools than commonly perceived. As you see here, the data published by the Florida Department of Education states that out of a total of 282,250 charter school students during the last academic year, 2016 to 2017, 32.1% were white, 20.5% African American, 41.5% Hispanic, and 5.8% identified as other. These percentages are not all what is commonly perceived to be the distribution of ethnicities in the charter schools. So that was very interesting data, and I look forward to doing my research on it. Another main concern for those who oppose charter schools is academic performance. The opposers cite the fact that charter schools are generally offered a great deal of freedom in selecting curriculum and developing instructional methods, and are legally able to hire less experienced teachers than their traditional public school counterparts. Proponents of charter schools hold that if charter schools don't do well, the students will leave, and the charter school will be able to sustain its own functioning, thus leading to a self-correcting solution. However, opponents to the movement do not seem to be convinced by this. So an examination of data is helpful in becoming more aware of the facts surrounding this issue. As you see in the pie chart, 42% of Florida's charter schools received a school ranking of A, while 23% received a school ranking of B for the 2016-2017 academic year. This can be compared to the data on traditional public schools from the same year, stating that only 35% of public schools earned a grade of A, while 23% earned a grade of B. When these numbers are compared, the discrepancy in performance seems to lean in favor of high performance by charter school students as compared to their traditional counterparts. Additionally, a study by the Center for Education Reform demonstrated that underperforming charter schools are more likely to be closed than any other school choice alternative, thus further supporting evidence for charter school accountability. Another hotly debated issue surrounding charter schools pertains to their funding. Opponents of charter schools often claim that charter schools drain much-needed funding from the public school system. However, both national and statewide research studies demonstrate that charter schools actually receive less federal and state funding per pupil than their traditional public school counterparts. One national study stated that charter schools are generally funded at 64% of their district counterparts. And in fact, on average, Florida charter schools receive approximately $2,130 less per student than their traditional public schools. You can see that in the graphic here, and the shaded area is the difference. So in opposition to the perception that charter schools drain money from the public school system, they may actually help with the efficient distribution of federal and state funds. The results of this investigation have yielded several research-backed guidelines for successful operation of charter schools. Most sources agree that quality, equity, accountability, and transparency are necessary, but different sources disagree on how to achieve those goals. Some sources go farther to indicate that states that permit schools the freedom to innovate and do not prescribe conditions that look and operate like traditional public schools will rank higher than those which limit variety and innovation. They state that there's a direct correlation between strong laws and successful charter schools. Those strong laws allow charters to be independent from traditional school boards, encourage innovation without excessive legislation, and also provide parents with numerous options to best meet the needs of their children. When compared to these standards, it seems that Florida is doing very well in its treatment of charter schools. In its 2017 National Charter School Laws Ranking and Scorecard, the Center for Education Reform ranked Florida as 7th most favorable state for school choice in the nation. In summary, the majority of my findings through investigation of the facts that correspond with common claims about charter schools indicate that charter schools are a valid choice option that do not inherently threaten America's public education system. I once again invite you to my full presentation on October 4th to hear the rest of my research and conclusions and open it up for questions. Yes, Dr. Lloyd. Yes, there is a certain involvement with or against the charter school movement. Generally, it's against. A lot of the teachers' unions have taken stances against charter schools for various reasons, but the majority of those reasons have to do with the same ones that I mentioned during the presentation, having to do with funding or the diversity. A lot of times they cite the fact that charter schools are able to hire less experienced teachers, and they really harp on the idea that that lessens the quality of the education. I believe that depends on the charter. Some of the larger, more organized charter schools do participate in those, but generally not. Yes. I did not in that section, but that, again, that's incomplete. I haven't finished my research on that. Yes, Dr. Templeton. Mm. That has not been something that we've looked at yet very in depth, but we will be looking into a little bit more. In general, though, it tends to be a perception that the charter school is taking something away from the public school. So whether that's funding, whether that's more privileged students or something to that effect. Yes. Oh, that's a good question. I'm studying English and secondary education, so I definitely have an interest in education and in education systems. I myself was homeschooled and know a lot of people who either attended private schools, public schools, charter schools, magnet schools, or were homeschooled for part or all of their education. And so that's been something that's been interesting to me for as long as I can remember, really. Yeah, so that varies depending on what domain you're talking about. The charter schools they are like a subset of the public schools. So a lot of things are the same, but they're also free of a lot of regulations on like how they build their buildings, what teachers they hire, allocation of funds, curricular requirements. And so in essence, there is a lot of flexibility, but they do have to meet for a certain number of days of the school year. They do have to kind of follow the same calendar and that kind of thing. Yes, Dr. Lloyd. To recreate our public education system? Mm. Mm-hmm. I think it's really hard to come up with a solution that solves every problem all at once in one step. And I think that the charter schools bring something really valuable to our education system in the sense of having flexibility and offering different options. But I don't know if I would say that I would overhaul the whole thing and just have charter schools. Yes, Dr. Templeton. That depends a lot on the area that I was in, on what charter school options were available. I think even within charter schools, you can't generalize too much. Every charter school is very different and runs very differently, and so that would depend a lot on where I was at and what was available. Can I take a quick poll? I'm very interested to know. So, would you do me a favor and raise your hand if your overall view of charter schools before this presentation was more positive? Okay. And would you raise your hand if your opinion has changed at all after this presentation or modified a bit? Okay, interesting. And then I'd be interested to know if those perceptions of charter schools come primarily from experiences or stories you've heard or your political ideology, what you believe about schooling. If anybody, yeah? Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Sarah. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. Andrew. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about what perceptions come through in the media, in the newspapers, and how easy it is to get caught up in exciting stories. Um, but I think it's also, it really depends on like what stories you hear, what experiences you have, and until you look at the facts, it's kind of hard to know. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. I believe so, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that no two kids are exactly the same and no two schools are exactly the same. And so one of the biggest lessons that I've taken away is that there's really not one solution for everything. And we have to be okay with that, and we have to be okay with looking for other options. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We have another wonderful presentation with Sarah in a minute, so I'm going to let her get set up. But thank you very much. Have a great day.